Hello and good morning. In this lesson, we will talk about performance measurement in a decentralized organization. A decentralized organization does not confine decision-making authority to a few top executives. Rather, decision-making authority is spread throughout the organization. Ito yung mga advantages or benefits of having a decentralized organization. It enables top management to concentrate on strategy, higher level decision making, and coordinating activities. So, hindi mo na binabother yung top management mo to focus on the day-to-day activity. Another benefit is that it acknowledges that lower level managers have more detailed information about local conditions that enable them to make better operational decisions. Another benefit is that it enables lower-level managers to quickly respond to customers. It provides lower-level managers with the decision-making experience they will need when promoted to higher-level positions. And last item na nakasulat dito sa slide natin as a benefit to having a decentralized organization is that it often increases motivation, resulting in increased job satisfaction and retention, as well as improved performance. If merong advantages yung pagkakaroon ng a decentralized organization, meron din itong disadvantages. So some of the disadvantages of having a decentralized organization we can see in the screen. Anong sabi dito? One is that lower level managers may make decisions without seeing the big picture. Pwede ring magkaroon ng lack of coordination among autonomous managers. Your lower level manager's objectives may not be those of the organization. So, pwedeng magkaroon ng tawag ito, disconnect between the objectives of the entire organization with the objective ng inyong lower level manager. And then another disadvantage written sa slide nito is that it may be difficult to spread innovative ideas in the organization. Responsibility accounting system link lower-level managers' decision-making authority with accountability for the outcomes of those decisions. The term responsibility center is used for any part of an organization whose manager has control over and is accountable for cost, profit, or investments. Meron tayong tatlo or three na primary types of responsibility centers. These are your cost centers, profit centers, and investment centers. So, let's begin with your cost center. Let's try to understand kung ano ito. So, a cost center is a segment whose manager has control over costs, pero wala siyang control over revenues or investment funds. So, if you want to assess the performance of your cost center manager, enough na yung gamitin natin yung variance analysis and assessing the performance of your cost center. So the standard costing that we have learned in the previous chapter, we can use standard costing as a tool to assess the performance of your cost center manager. Next is we have your profit center. Itong profit center naman is a segment whose manager has control over both costs and revenues. Pero unfortunately, wala pa rin siyang control over investment funds. So if what do you call this? If cost center, pwede mong i-assess yung performance niya using tools ng standard costing. Same rin with profit center. You can still use the tools that you used for cost center para i-assess yung performance niya in assessing the performance of your profit center. So, pero hindi ka lang magpo-focus on purely cost. You also include revenue in assessing the performance of your segment manager of a profit center. So cost center, profit center, you can make use of the tools that we have learned in standard costing. And then the next one here is we have an investment center. Investment center is a segment whose manager has control over costs, revenues, and investment. To properly assess his or her performance, hindi na enough yung tools that we have learned in standard costing. So, yun yung focus natin sa chapter na to. So, sa chapter na to, ang focus natin is to learn tools that will be helpful for us later on in assessing the performance of the managers of our investment centers. Okay, so we have here the organizational chart for Superior Foods Corporation. Let's try to identify whether a particular box here or segment is a revenue center, a profit center, or an investment center. So in this slide, may arrow tayo nakikita and then naka-pinpoint sa President and CEO as well as to the Operations Vice President. And sabi dito sa slide ito na yung office nila is an investment center. Bakit sila investment center? Because if you try to take a look at the organizational chart, medyo nasa taas na sila and they get to influence cost, they get to influence revenue kasi they get to decide on things. And at the same time, hindi lang revenue and cost yung nai-influence or nako-control nila or may say sila, may say din sila sa investment. That's why they are considered also as an investment center. By the way, before things get out of hand, no, i-clear lang natin what do we mean by investment here. For this particular chapter, ang investment that we refer to is the acquisition of any assets for the company, particularly non-current assets. So, hindi ito pure investments that we know of in financial accounting. Hindi ito investments that we refer to stocks and bonds. So, any non-current assets that the company will be buying or will be purchasing, for this particular chapter, we refer to them as investment. In this slide naman, we get to meet those centers under profit centers. So, sino-sino sila? You have salty snacks, beverages, and confections product manager. Bakit sila considered as profit center? They are considered profit center because meron silang control over cost and revenue. Kasi say for example, si salty snacks, hindi lang siya nagma-manufacture, so hindi lang cost meron siya, nagbibenta din siya nung product. So, si Salty Snacks na product manager, meron siyang sales and meron siyang expenses. That's why yung segment niya is considered as a profit center. Now, what if Salty Snacks product manager may say rin sa acquisition ng non-current assets? In a way, makaka-decide siya whether bibili ba ng non-current assets for his segment, then Salty Snacks become an investment center. Pero in this case, our assumption is that salty snacks, beverages product manager, as well as confections product manager, wala silang say or wala silang, what do you call this? Wala silang power to decide whether to purchase non-current assets. So if that is the case, then we just consider them as a profit center. Again, the reason why salty snacks, beverages, and confections product manager is a profit center is because hindi lang cost ang meron sila, meron din silang revenue. By the way, sa previous slide, I forgot to talk about the chief financial officer, your general counsel, and your personal vice president. Sa previous slide, naka-highlight pala doon that they are considered as cost center. Bakit itong tatlo? Ha-highlight ko na lang dito kasi I forgot to mention that sa previous slide. Ito sila. Ayan.
your chief financial officer, your general counsel, and your vice president. Why are they considered cost center? The reason is that wala naman silang revenue. Your personal vice president um, doesn't have any products to sell. Ano lang ang kanyang ano lang yung ino-oversee niya, the personnel or the employees or the manpower in the organization. So that being the case, ano lang meron siya, purely cost. So wala siyang revenue kasi hindi naman siya nagbebenta ng tao or hindi naman siya, what do you call this, hindi niya naman ino-offer yung services ng mga tao niya to other people for a fee. Okay, ang minamanage siya is the personnel of Superior Foods Corporation. So that being the case, purely gastos lang meron siya. So your personnel vice president, your legal, general counsel, and your chief financial officer, the departments that they belong, the departments that they head, are considered as cost center. And here, just to complete yung entire organizational chart ng Superior Foods Corporation, yung inyong bottling plant, yung inyong warehouse manager, yung inyong distribution manager, they are considered as cost centers. Same reason bakit cost center yung CFO, bakit cost center yung your legal department headed by your general counsel and personnel department. The reason bottling plant, warehouse, and distributions are cost centers because they don't incur revenue. What they have is purely cost. Gastos lang sila ng gastos. That's why they are considered as a cost center. So, ayun, medyo may idea na tayo na. So, may idea na tayo what are the different responsibility centers. So, repeat lang natin, if the department is purely gastos ng gastos lang, then we consider them as a cost center. If a department on top of the gastos gets to earn revenue as well, then they are considered as a profit center. And if that department on top of the revenue and cost gets to influence also investment side, then that department is considered as an investment center. So after having a clear understanding on the different responsibility centers, I believe we are all ready to begin with our first learning objective, and that is to prepare a segmented income statement using the contribution format and explain the difference between traceable fixed costs and your common fixed costs. Before we prepare your segmented income statement, let's understand first what a segment is. A segment is any part or activity of an organization about which a manager seeks cost, revenue, or profit data. Yung segment can be an individual store, pwede rin siyang a sales territory or a service center. For Superior Foods, pwede siyang mag-segment ng business niya using geographic region. So, meron siyang Singapore as a segment, Malaysia as a segment, and then China as a segment, and then may sub-segment pa rin pa talaga siya under China. So, yun. You can have a segment based on geographical locations or pwede ka rin gumawa ng segment based on your customer channel. So, looking at Superior Foods Corporation, pwede siyang mag-segment if using customer channel. So, may segment siya for convenience stores, supermarket chains, wholesale distributors, as well as a drugstore. Now, looking at the customer channel of Superior Foods Corporation, segue lang ako ha. This reminds me of a particular stock in the Philippine Stock Exchange. In a way, ganito yung business model for Mary Mart. For those na nasa isulan, taga-isulan sa inyo, I'm sure you are familiar already with Mary Mart. Kasi yung Save More nyo ata, pinalitan ng Mary Mart. So, looking at the business model of that particular company, ito yung kanyang magiging customer channel. Meron siyang Meron siyang convenience stores, so ala 7-Eleven. Meron siyang supermarket chains. Meron siyang wholesale distributor. And then, within a Mary Mart, meron din silang drugstores. Kung ayaw mo namang i-segment using customer chat, pwede ka ring mag-segment using a product, um, a particular store. So, pwede mo siyang i-segment per store kung what do you call this, kung franchisee ka ni Jollibee and then meron kang, say for example lang ha, meron kang 4 na franchise. So, pwede mo siyang i-individual store. Ma'am, bakit hindi location? Say for example, yung 4 na franchises nasa Davao City lahat. So, hindi na pwede, wag na nating location kasi Davao City naman. So, pwedeng individual store. Pwede rin yung pag-segment mo is per product. Okay? Depende sa business mo or depende how you see it more appropriate for your business kung paano sila i-segmentize. The important thing here is, what you call this, ma-understand mo the reason behind bakit ganun yung pag-segment mo sa kanila or rather ganun yung groupings mo sa kanila. Okay? So, now let's continue our discussion. Let's talk about keys to segmented income statement. So what are the keys? There are two keys, dalawang susi to building segmented income statement. One is a contribution format should be used. I'm sure by now you are already very familiar on how to prepare income statement using the contribution margin format. Pero may dagdag lang siya because at this point, instead of just deducting fixed cost from your contribution margin, at this point, kailangan nating i-break down yung inyong fixed cost into traceable fixed cost and common fixed costs. So, you will learn later on how we separate your traceable fixed cost from your common fixed cost. But still, the income statement format that we will be using in preparing your segmented income statement is still the contribution margin format. Ang kaibahan lang talaga is that at this point, we will be separating traceable fixed costs from your common fixed costs. Now, let's identify whether a particular fixed cost is a traceable fixed cost or a common fixed cost. In identifying whether they are traceable or common, it's very simple. All you have to remember is this one. If that particular segment is eliminated, will this particular fixed cost gets eliminated as well? If the answer is yes, then that fixed cost is a traceable fixed cost. But if the answer is no, then that is a common fixed cost. Let's repeat that one, ha? To identify whether a fixed cost is traceable or not, you just ask yourself this question. If I will eliminate this particular segment, etong fixed cost ba na to gets eliminated as well? If the answer is yes, then that particular fixed cost is a traceable fixed cost to that particular segment. If the answer is no, then that particular fixed cost is not a traceable fixed cost to that segment. Say for example, on top dito sa example na nakikita natin sa slide natin, we belong to the School of Business and Governance. If say for example, tinanggal nila, example lang ito ha, if Ateneo would decide to drop or eliminate the School of Business and Governance, then wala na tayong dean for the School of Business and Governance, right? Kasi wala na tayong School of Business and Governance. So, pag wala ng SBG, wala na rin yung dean ng SBG. So, yung sweldo ng dean ng SBG is a traceable fixed cost to the SBG, to the School of Business and Governance. Pero how about yung sweldo ni Attorney Kibod, the legal counsel ng Ateneo de Davao University? Yung sweldo niya is still the same whether may SBG or wala. So, if SBG gets eliminated or dinrap ni Adu kasi ayaw na magkaroon ng School of Business and Governance, Attorney Kibod will still be there and his salary will still be the same. So, si Attorney Kibod is not a traceable fixed cost to the SBG. Rather, ano siya, yung kanyang sweldo is a common fixed cost. Pero yung sweldo ng dean is a traceable fixed cost kasi yun nga, if SBG gets eliminated, wala na rin tayong SBG din. So, yung kanyang allowance, wala na rin yun. So, as we have learned from the previous slide, anything na hindi traceable to a segment is a common fixed cost. So, yung common fixed cost ninyo arise because of the overall operation of the company and would not disappear if any particular segment were eliminated. For this particular slide, ang ginawa niyang example is the company president. So, whether you have the computer division or wala, you still have the company president. Now, take note of this pala ha. Your traceable cost can become common cost depending on the cost object that we are talking about. So, um, example, let's go back to the School of Business and Governance. As I have mentioned earlier, the Dean of the School of Business and Governance, yung kanyang salary and allowance is a traceable fixed cost to the School of Business and Governance. But if we talk of individual departments within the School of Business and Governance, the salary and allowance of the Dean of the School of Business and Governance is not a direct fixed cost to the different departments within SBG, but rather ano siya, but rather a common cost. Say, for example, how many departments do we have in the School of Business and Governance? We have accountancy, we have management accounting, we have marketing, we have human resource, etc. We have the business management and so on. So, mga around 8 departments. And we only have one dean for the School of Business and Governance. So, if we look at SBG as a segment, then the salary and allowance of the dean is a traceable fixed cost to the School of Business and Governance as a segment. But if we have individualized segment within the School of Business and Governance, if we take accountancy, if we take management accounting, if we take business and management, HR, marketing as different segments, then the salary and allowance of the Dean of the School of Business and Governance becomes a common cost. So I hope that is clear to all of us.
So at this point, I believe we are ready to prepare our segmented income statement. Let's make use of Weber Incorporated to illustrate how to prepare a segmented income statement. So we have here Weber Incorporated and meron siyang dalawang division. The two divisions under Weber Incorporated is the computer division and the television division. Let's look more closely at the television division's income statement. So we have here the income statement
using the contribution margin format for the television division. So, yung sales niya is 300,000. Tapos, yung kanyang total variable costs is 150. Ang breakdown ng 150 is variable COGS and your other variable costs. So our contribution margin is 150. 300 less 150 na total variable costs. We have a contribution margin of 150,000. And from your contribution margin, we deduct our traceable fixed costs and we arrive with our division margin of 60,000. Your division margin is also your segment margin. They mean the same thing, huh? Division margin, segment margin, they mean the same thing. So your segment margin, this is your contribution to the profit of the entire company. It is telling us that television division is contributing 60,000 to the entire profits of the Weber Incorporated or to the entire company.